Great. Well, good afternoon, everybody. And for those of you who are joining, I'd like to welcome you all to today's discussion on the role of community in real estate, specifically looking at space as a service. Today, we'll be looking at issues and opportunities around portfolio level community creation, covering such topics as how do you activate a community, a successful community, what's the mindset behind that, and some of the technology aspects in terms of being able to create a community. Just a bit about myself. I'm David Wong. I'm co-founder and CEO of a company called BOOQED, which is a B2B product platform that works together with companies and asset owners to find or monetize short-term unused spaces to meet or work. And I'll be your host for today. Today, we've got a very interesting panel group that represents co-working and property developers. So very briefly, I'd like to just quickly introduce my co-hosts and we'll get straight into it. So with us today includes Shantanu Chakraborty, who's Executive Vice President of Brookfield Properties, Thomas Cragg, who is VP of Sales for flexible workspace and talent sourcing provider KMC Solutions in the Philippines, Brandon Chia, Head of Singapore and Indonesia for JustCo, and last but not least, Marcus Lim, who is Head of Flexible Workspace and Community Experience at CapitaLand. So one comment just before we begin, if you do have a question for our co-hosts, you have the option throughout this discussion. You'll see a place to actually enter the chat. So just type in your question using that function, and towards the end of the session, we'll look to cover any specific questions that might arise. So with that, why don't we jump straight into it? Oh, and welcome to Damien as well from Chinachem. Sorry, I didn't see you join the forum. Warm welcome to you as well. So look, I think given the diversity of the panel, a really good place to start for me would be to kind of get the definition of community. And this is, I find it very interesting because obviously with developers versus co-working spaces or flexible space providers, I think there's some differences, or there may be some differences. So with that, why don't we start off with sort of some definitions? So Brandon, from JustCo, I know you've been very, very successful in Southeast Asia, now into Korea. Just really interested to get your perspective of what community looks like from JustCo's perspective.
Okay, I think, hi everyone, thanks for having me here. It's really a pleasure to share my thoughts and views regarding community. So, okay, I mean, in short, how JustCo as a whole, we look at community itself, I think we'll keep it very simple. I think we can start off from a wide array of perspective. I mean, we can talk about, say, how the space is being designed, how we apply technology in the way that we work for our members, how we create events as well as structure certain partnership benefits that will be beneficial for the community as a whole. We put all that aside. If I can summarize everything about community, I think it's creating an environment whereby it allows opportunities for individuals and businesses to succeed. And I think that's the main crux about creating communities, where everyone is able to interchange ideas, leverage on each other's expertise itself, come together to create something bigger than themselves. That to me is what community is all about.
Interesting. So Damien, look, from a Chinachem perspective, because I know that you have malls, you have retail, retail, you've got offices. Is that something you'd agree with? I mean, what are some of the things that you see as sort of how you would define community within your ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, traditionally, for us as developer, community usually really just means the neighborhood around our properties, plus the end users in the property. So that's a more traditional rent receiving type of business model view. And then, however, in the last few years, we are indeed starting to also look at the more kind of specific communities like the co-working, co-living type of communities. I'm really glad to, thanks for having me here. And frankly, we are kind of still struggling a bit in that to see how this more well-defined specific communities interact with or associate with our traditional community and what role we as developers can play. We have done some experiments with co-working, co-living, etc., with various degrees of success. So we would love to hear from others as well.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Damien. Also, would love to hear from Shantanu, for representing another developer, Brookfield. How do you define community? How do you see community within the context of Brookfield's developments and Brookfield's business?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting question. The way we see communities is that it has two roles, right? Either communities get together and they get a huge leverage in terms of all their needs being common, and they can negotiate better with those suppliers who can fulfill those needs. That's one sort of community, and the other sort of community is a more self-sustaining one, where the needs, as well as the people who can fulfill those needs, are within the same community, and they there could be transactions that can be fulfilled within that space itself. And I think within Brookfield Properties, I think the scale that we have, we can do both. We can get people, the end users, to be together and get some of their needs which are outside of their office needs, so as to say, being fulfilled in a much more efficient manner, in a much more value based manner. And at the same point of time, it's the same community which can fulfill each other's needs, whether it's having common interests, whether it's about getting access to a set of community, for their local needs. So I think all of that can be done, and I think technology obviously plays a very big part in ensuring both of these things can happen together.
Yeah, thanks for that, Shantanu. So you raised something that sort of really resonated with me. Obviously, from my perspective, community is the whole opportunity with community is something that I'm really big on. And so, let's talk a little bit about that. So one of the trends that we have been seeing in recent years is really that whole growing need to create, for lack of a better word, micro communities, right? So places for like-minded people to live or to work. So taking that to maybe a next step, or sort of a logical conclusion, does it then follow that fostering human connection, right, that opportunity to create spaces that bring people together or cultivate happiness or help people find meaning, would you say that this is the new role of the real estate developer? And this would be, Marcus, be interested to hear your perspective on that.
All right, thanks. Shantanu, you wanted to say something?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, right. Apologies. Right. So, well, from CapitaLand standpoint, we manage estates from, say, in Singapore, right, a cluster of CBD offices, business parks, science parks. We also have industrial and logistic buildings, and of course our own flexible workspace co-working solutions too. So in that context, and we look at it, and our main tenants or users of our solutions are mainly businesses or enterprises. Now, when they take up space with us, they're in for a fairly long haul, right? For of these traditional real estates, it could be 3 years, 5 years, or longer than that for some of these logistics or industrial facilities. And of course, from a co-working standpoint, it could be months or even down to 2 years. Now, for the duration of stay with us, it's imagine, if all of us have taken on a flight. It has been a long time since we last taken a flight, I'm sure many of us. Right, you've been trapped in the flight with cabin crew or for a long period of time. Imagine our customers staying in that cabin for 3 years. How going to make that good use of that moment, right? Of that long duration of just by physical displacement that we're all kept in the same location. We can live it that they all will go about their own business, doing their own things, or as a landlord or as the cabin owner, or for that matter, try to make the best out of that moment where everybody is kept together for that duration of time. And I think that's the part of the role that as a landlord, we have the opportunity to kind of inject kind of this moment and facilitate this engagement for people who are located or working in the same business environment. And I think this is the part where we feel despite having a great space, you can create a great space, having event spaces, atrium, and things like that. There's a lot of activation required. And it takes effort to kind of engineer that. And then I think it's very important for us to try to do that, because at the end of the day, the building's relevance to the occupiers in the end is what sort of experience or engagement they can get out of that. While they can just commute to their workstation, take the lift, just work and then leave at the end of the day. We hope to be able to kind of support their lifestyle as well, broaden the sort of, the user experience by supplanting some of this human engagement that we can introduce, especially beyond or with people that goes beyond the organization they're acquainted with. Beyond the colleagues, how about, getting to know somebody across the, the doorway or across the different floors, and hopefully that will give birth to some new form of network, relationships, business partnerships, friendships, and I think that will make their stay here in an estate a lot more meaningful compared to just treating it as a piece of community where they come in to just get work done and leave, right? I think we'll look at it from that standpoint. How do we stretch that experience, beyond just being a functional need, to start to serve as a community kind of experience frontage? I think it's important that we have that opportunity to try to create it.
Interesting. So Marcus, and look, I mean, you raise a really interesting point, because I mean, look, and I some of our clients and partners are developers, and that is quite the viewpoint that you're talking about. In some ways, I'd argue is a little bit radical, right? Because before it was just, if you build it, they will come. So I want to open this up. I know Shantanu had something to add, and then I want to ask Thomas specifically from the perspective of sort of a service office co-working type operation. Shantanu, you had something to add on that?
I think I resonate with what Marcus said, because there was a point of time where you build good buildings, good quality infrastructure, you would get clients and occupy the spaces. I think the narrative has changed completely from that position. Today, HR has a very big say in where the offices should be, right? And when that happens, it's not just the real estate teams or the infrastructure teams. It's when the HR starts saying where the real estate should be, that's when the whole experience layer needs to come in. And what we have seen is that if you provide good experience, there is high level of stickiness amongst the employees to be in that location, be with that company, which basically means higher retention rate for IT and tech companies, and in a sector where manpower is the biggest cost. If you can address retention through a real estate solution, I think you've really aced it, and that's exactly the transition that I think all developers are trying to make today. Ensure the end users are happy, well engaged, and want to be there. So in some way, the real estate has moved from a B2B business to a B2B2C business, and that's where I think the whole community angle plays a very, very big important factor.
Interesting. Thomas, would love to get your perspective from a sort of flexible service provider perspective.
Sure. Yeah, I was actually somewhat relieved when you didn't ask me about community. It's sort of a tricky question to answer for KMC. We're the largest flexible office space provider here in the Philippines, and have a roughly 18,000 members as of today. But and I think we're all sort of saying the same thing here. But the ecosystem, or the KMC circle, as we call it, has a much wider reach now, and I think the pandemic has had a lot to do with that. We have a wonderful footprint here in the Philippines, which means that we can host events pre-pandemic, obviously, in multiple locations, whether it's north, south, central, even in Visayas region and up in Clark, that kind of thing. But I think that what the pandemic has really sort of expedited, at least for us, is really engage in a much larger community, which extends to partnerships with transportation providers. So, providing that that transportation for the employees from their home to the office lobby. So controlling that whole experience because of all the restrictions that we've experienced here. I think particularly in the Philippines. So in addition to that, you've got partnerships with people that provide accommodation to our members and to our staff. So it's really much bigger now, and really just adds diversity to that community. You're talking to people from all walks of life, so you get a lot of very, very different perspectives in the virtual events that we're hosting and everything else. I'm not sure if that quite answers your question, David, but yeah, I think in terms of what are we doing differently now? Yes, I mean, absolutely. We were fortunate enough to be in a position to keep building throughout the pandemic, and we're continuing to expand here. So, specifically on the office space side, we were, I guess, somewhat fortunate that we hadn't started building in those facilities, so we reached out to designers in Singapore, as it happens, Contrast, and they were able to come in and really change the way we build, in the sense that a lot of the space now is really like much more collaborative. I believe that specific location is almost 30% now. I'll call it common areas, and I know we all know what that means, but all various size conference rooms, training rooms, co-working spaces, which can be used, and opened up to host events and everything else. So yeah, I think it's definitely, creating these mini communities within these spaces is absolutely crucial, because prior to the pandemic, work from home was almost like a dirty word. Nobody, until we all had to do it, it was deemed impossible. And we've sort of realized that that's not the case. So we're definitely not naive enough, and we listen to our clients enough to know that when they come back, it's not going to be coming into a 100 seats production desks. Fortunately, we have BPOs that still need those kind of requirements. Obviously, a big part of our client base here in the Philippines, but a lot of those other companies are going to be looking more at coming into the office to collaborate. And one of my clients said it best the other day. The office space is where the magic happens. So in terms of innovation and collaboration and culture, that's everything's 10 times more time consuming when you're trying to build trust and everything else virtually.
Yeah, some really, really good points raised. Thanks for that, Thomas. Before I sort of do a follow-on on this, just look to the participants. Just a reminder that you have the opportunity to ask questions as well. We'd appreciate. I'm sure that the co-hosts would love to be able to share some of their perspectives. So if you do have any questions, please just tap that out in the chat box. So look, just to follow up on this, I find it very, very interesting, because I think this is what I'm hearing is quite different than even sort of 2 or 3 years ago, where I think the perspective especially from maybe the asset owners, is if you build it, they will come, right? You didn't really have to do too much in the way of amenities or building community. So the question I have, and I think I'd like you to sort of consider this maybe from the perspective of your business, or sort of the position of your business within the real estate ecosystem. What are actually some of the tangible benefits for building communities? Marcus, I know that you sort of address the opportunity about sort of engagement and maybe sort of renewing of leases. But why? So if I'm an asset owner, right, and I've been doing well, I've got 95% occupancy in my buildings. Why do I need to build community? What are some of these tangible benefits that come through? And I think, Marcus, since you very eloquently sort of talked about that earlier, why don't we start off with you on that?
Right, thank you. Okay. Well, I think it is always a challenge, right? I think there's an ongoing proposition to the asset managers, right? The value of community. It's something that is always evolving. I think there's always the magic grail to say, we can stick a value. This is how it adds to your asset valuation and things like that. Right? But unfortunately, I don't think we have arrived to that state. But that's it. I think there's a great consensus that by everybody who operates and owns in a building that the value of community it generates. there are a few perspectives to that. First and foremost, I think it's a way to differentiate asset from its peers. All right, it's a bit of a marketing, but it's also a way to create an identity, a character of a building. You use community as an identifier to kind of just put the wrapper around. Okay, you have this great building, this is well designed, and so forth. But who goes there? What sort of users interact with this building? Who are located in there? I think that community gives that signal that these are the possible candidates of users that should be located here. And I think it then resonates with just the societal needs, how we engage with this real estate. All right, by having that community interface. Once you define that, you have a great clear identity of the tribes that you serve within that estate. People will know, oh, okay, this is it has the opportunity to now elevate a building into a destination. All right, and when it comes to a destination, that's a great proposition for many property owners, right? Because you want a building that can address that sort of attention. And it does certainly help with the prospecting effort and of course retention as well. And obviously we also want to use that as a way to kind of segment our user audience, our prospecting efforts. Because if we know that there's a specific group of users that keep coming to this building, when you are doing marketing and leasing, you can easily narrow down to that user groups and start to probe from there. And those user groups will see that value proposition. So it's kind of self-reinforcing. The other aspect is, of course, it does help in creating a great sense of belonging to the tenant community. All right. So I think that part is in some way or another very intangible way of saying, I'd like to come to this building to work because yes, X and Y, Z or things that I could do with people who work in the building. Now, it would be great we get to a state where, when somebody asks you, where are you working? You want to say the building instead of the company. I think that would be a really nice touch, right? You say, I'm working at 79 Robinson Road, instead of saying, I'm working with this multinational. It says a lot about what that community is about. Coming to that building, it's more than an employer, this sort of relationship that you have. And I think it's an affirmation that, about what that estate represents to the needs of the eventual occupiers and the end users. I think that's one part we strive to build. And the way it also envelop the sort of services around the needs of the end users themselves, whether is it from in a workspace context, of course. It's always starting with their business and professional needs, and then not forgetting, of course, being humans, right? How about the social and leisure needs, and kind of using that to shape our programming at the building layer, using our programming to kind of push that sort of levers. What sort of activities we can help you to kind of enhance your growth in the business and network professional development perspective, and through our activities, how can we help you expand your social network? Make more friends, and in that dimension, it certainly helped to kind of build that sort of appreciation of an estate. I think to address that question, it's kind of this whole halo effect that we are able to generate. Unfortunately, it will be a destination that we want to get to where we can start to quantify what this halo effect means in dollars and cents.
Interesting. So Damien, from say Chinachem's perspective, you have a ton of real estate assets, not only in Hong Kong but regionally. Agree, disagree? What would you? Anything you'd like to add to what Marcus has shared?
Yeah, frankly, on principle, at least, totally agree with a lot of things that you guys have shared. But my question though is, we have done some experiments with both co-living and co-working in our properties and stuff. Frankly, the results have not been that encouraging from a asset owner's perspective. So my question will be, actually, have you guys, as developers, have you guys done any ROI on that? Now, I'm a big believer in these kind of co-working, co-living business models, but every time when we crunch the numbers and we try to convince the board to invest, and especially with some experience done in the past, it becomes a tough job. So our experience is that actually co-working, the co-working and co-living models can only survive in properties that are not quote unquote hot. Unfortunately, for example, in this part of town in Hong Kong, where even for offices during the pandemic, it's not that difficult to rent out, and everybody expects the market rebound anyways. The added value of implementing those services doesn't seem to justify. So now having said that, I totally agree with what Marcus said earlier. It helps to kind of distinguish your asset. So from that perspective, we are still trying to offer, for example, common co-working spaces in some of office buildings to our tenants and stuff like that. But that becomes more like really just amenities, more like just additional facilities. And so far, we haven't seen really any positive increment to the top line. So is that your experience, or do you see something different from different parts of the world?
This is a really interesting question, the whole ROI discussion, because that's something, obviously, when you start talking amenities and, you know, so the whole softer things such as community, I guess, you know, how do you quantify that? How do you quantify the benefits? So look, I think this is a question like I'd like to open it to all of you, because I think I'd be really interested to hear, you know, the perspective from both, say, the co-working or service provider perspective, as well as the developer.
David, if I may, I'll just chime in. I think just to share my experience, you know, hindsight's a beautiful thing. I think when, you know, KMC was really built out of necessity. So we really spent a lot of time listening to our clients and really establishing what their pain points were and how we could support them. And that's why we do the office space, and we're very, very proud of the spaces we put together. But there's a lot of value add built around it in terms of managed services, whether that's technology, tech services, HR, payroll, recruitment. There's a lot of support services and business tools that we provide our clients. When we started venturing into co-working, as the VP of sales, not the owner, as the VP of sales, I knew co-working was never going to move the needle for me. So when I was looking at my targets for the year, I knew that, you know, closing some co-working deals was never going to get me significantly closer to those targets. But what I've really definitely realized since is that the community that you build with co-working alongside those other verticals is just vast in terms of you know, like the amount of you know, workshops we do, events, everything else, bringing these clients from all walks of life together creates these opportunities. And I just checked the stats prior to coming onto this call. About 40% of our business is from referrals, and I think for KMC, you know, had we not taken the plunge into co-working alongside private offices, flexible office space, everything else, you know, we might not have ever like quite got to that point where we had this huge KMC circle, and obviously, you know, referrals are the best possible leads you can get in terms of conversion rates and everything else. So I think for me, it's almost impossible to, you know, put a dollar figure on it, but I think that's really where we've seen the value in terms of ROI.
Yeah, one interjection there before I open it back up again. So just a couple of observations, I think, from our experience, you know, working with both developers and co-working providers. No, so one extreme example, I think, is that, you know, my impression in general has been that I think developers, coming from a developer perspective, sometimes being able to offer services, as in, say, setting up your own co-working brand, you know, as a means to develop community, can be difficult. I mean, it's not something that necessarily, it's sort of new ground for many developers. And that's just my observation. Feel free to correct me if you think otherwise. But with that then comes sort of a different set of expectations as well, in terms of how, you know, one great example, there's a developer who we know here in Hong Kong, where I think they have their own co-working brand. I'm not going to name who it is, but the utilization of that is, it's meant to be an amenity. It's meant to be building community, but it's not really well used. And so with that kind of an example, I think, how do you justify that? What are some of the things that you look at from an ROI or actual financial return? So, let me just open that up, but I just wanted to kind of share a couple of perspectives that we're seeing, certainly, with our clients across the region.
Sure. Maybe I would like to also just join the discussion a little bit to chime my 2 cents worth. Damien, I hear your point. I think that if I can simplify an answer for that question of yours, is I think it's just one word, is to ensure that there's a proper alignment of interest. I think aligning the interests of all parties in a estate itself ensures success. So for example, if we talk about the earlier question whereby we're talking about whether is it the role of the developer to ensure micro communities can succeed, I believe that if we all are here as a panel in the same industry one way or the other, and we believe in the power of community, therefore we must also agree that the role itself is not to be performed by just a single party, whether it's a co-living, co-working, or a developer's perspective. It has to be from everyone. And I'm very envious of Marcus itself, because CapitaLand basically have everything on the plate itself to play with. Yeah, JustCo, we are just an activator of space. So on that question itself, if we all believe that in order for us to create a successful community itself, then everybody must play a part in that, not just from development of the estate itself to ensure that it encourages the development of communities. It also boils down into the landlord in deciding who goes into the tenant mix itself, and ensuring that might be also have to have a section whereby they are able to attend to both the flex and core needs of their tenants as well. And down to the selection of a strategic partner who's going to run the co-working space to ensure there's a very clear alignment of all the interests. Talking from JustCo's perspective itself, when we started about 10 years ago, we were operating on a very, very modest scale. What we do mainly is, of course, building community on a very small level. We started like about 3,000 square feet of space. And as of today itself, we have grown nearly close to about 1 million square foot of operating assets under management itself. So our experience itself has taught us is that the power of the community is really very relevant. We have seen a community that we have built that consists of various areas of industry professionals, from startups all the way up to your multinationals, and how they have actually connected to one another or help each other succeed in their line of business, how they are able to leverage upon each other's expertise to create bigger successes itself. We have experienced pretty good success in that. Otherwise, I think we will not be able to progress to a scale as we are today, and we are still progressing very strongly. So what we have done as a company itself, we have decided that we need to readjust our approach and align our interests and our experience and success as a community operator on a small scale together with the interests of the landlord itself. That is why over the past recent period itself, we have actually focused a lot in terms of asset-light strategies. I think we have partnered quite successfully with some of the landlords in Singapore, including like CapitaLand, as well as a couple of others that we've actually come on board with. The whole purpose for that is to ensure that JustCo, being an operator of a community or a co-working itself, we bring value not just operating as a silo, but we bring value to the entire real estate development as well. So for example, say we have a property A, whereby JustCo is the co-working space operator itself, and assuming that asset itself is able to accommodate, assuming there is no co-working player, assuming 10 tenants, that means that building itself will only be able to sustain 10 different companies in that space. But if you have a co-working element in one of the floors, easily you're able to increase your members or your tenants by 2, 3, or 4, or even 5 times. And what it means is that, first of all, it builds a community for the building itself. And as startups grow and they develop itself, they are also they also were more likely to want to be staying in the same location and grow within the building itself. And then there's more cross-related function that they can achieve out of there, you see. So I think that that is really what I feel from my perspective of my experience itself, Damien, on how to ensure that there will be a very successful return in terms of the effort that you put in. And the answer to that is all about having the right alignment. If we see developers performing the role as just development, if we see that co-working perform the role as co-working, and we see the landlord performing the role as a landlord, there is no alignment. And then I think the community itself doesn't exist to start with. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, Brand. Very interesting perspective. I'd also be interested to hear from Shantanu to get sort of the Brookfield perspective on this, on the whole ROI discussion.
See, I mean, I think, so first of all, let's see what's the quantum of investment that's required to create this community. Now, we are more in the business of developing large campuses, which are 3 million, 4 million square feet or upwards of that. Now, there to create amenities and communities, or add a layer of technology so that all of that can be available at a click of a finger. The investment per se is significantly lower than what you can the overall construction or the development budget. So that's one angle. So it's a very, very small line in the overall cost structure. Secondly, I think what also happens is that there's some bit of a monetization opportunity there, which to some extent justifies some of these investments, not the entire thing, but some of it. And then I think what we have realized is the recurring expenditure that is incurred in creating or maintaining these communities, the occupiers themselves are willing to pay for it, right? They come up and say that we pay something called what is called as operations and maintenance charges. And this can be a part of it, and there's a recovery, that we do from the occupiers, on this aspect, and occupiers are willing to pay for it because they see a value in terms of their employees getting engaged and the stickiness being increased. So I think for us it makes 100%. In fact, it's a no loss, no gain kind of a situation with the potential to gain more. And I can understand in a place like a Singapore or Hong Kong, where real estate is so prime and so precious commodity. One occupier leaving, backfilling it is very, very easy. You may already have a pipeline when an occupier is serving notice. In fact, you may want to throw him out because he's paying lower rent, and you may want to do a mark to market. Cut to a situation in India, in a place like NCR or some other places, where you are in a slightly oversupply situation, where there are third grade developers who are willing to cut prices. You are in a retention mode, and this investment, even if there's no factual ROI on it, this investment is more like a protective investment. You're making this investment so that you can protect your cash flows on the longer term. You can ensure stickiness. You can ensure retention of your clients. So I think for us, it makes 100% sense. In fact, last 5 years that we've been working in India, the very first thing that we've done when we've acquired properties is to ensure they're amenitized to a certain basic level, because these amenities were not created in these spaces when they were built or when they were conceived. But now that we've acquired them, almost in every property we've made these changes in terms of introducing these amenities and then adding a layer of technology to make them available to the end users at a click of a button.
No, thanks for sharing, Shantanu. Look, these perspectives I'm getting, I find it really fascinating, and certainly, I think this is just a really tremendous discussion. I want to take this time though and change gears a little bit. So we've talked about community and sort of the definitions. We've talked a little bit about some of the ROI, some of the benefits, and what have you. The sort of one thing I would like to talk about, and now just kind of get your feedback, is when you talk about building effective communities, what are some of the ways that, whether you're a developer, whether you're co-working, I know some of this has been addressed indirectly previously, but how would you go about building an effective community? Maybe to start off, we can go to Brandon from, talk about the JustCo experience.
Oh, okay. How do sorry, my answers are usually, I try to keep it quite short. But if you ask me, how do we then look at building effective communities? I think we first have to identify who is in the community. I'm speaking this from the perspective of JustCo, whereby is our business itself revolves around serving the members of our community. So I would say that the first thing that we always have to do, and our top priority, is of course listening to our community and listening to our members. I think only through constant listening and gathering of feedback itself, we run a lot of data and information with regard to the information shared as well as feedback shared by our members itself. And the whole purpose behind that is allowing us to better understand the needs of our members, which will help us design better products, better solution itself. And also at the same time, we have to think about what is the most effective as well as a sustainable solution we can bring forth to the community. That is, of course, designing better solution. But next, of course, itself is that only through listening to our community as well as our members itself, they will actually guide us on how we should then structure our business decision on where do we grow. I mean, like it or not, the members are actually our customers, and they are the ones that actually sustains our livelihood as well. So we have to listen to understand what they are looking for. And that's the reason why, from JustCo itself, the areas that we've expanded have also gone overseas, because we realize we are supporting a bigger and bigger and bigger group of members that come from a very diverse range as well as multinationals. And the only way that we can be of constant support to them in building effective community is through expansion as well. And expanding to where and the right market itself is also very important. And as long as you listen to your customers, you'll get wrong. Yeah, 90% of the time you get wrong. And I think the other part about being able to build effective community is about being able to really embrace technology and be constantly innovating. I think we are now living in an age whereby it's very difficult to work in silo. The internet age I think we have only just scratched the tip of the iceberg. How far it's going to take us, we still do not know. But definitely for sure, what COVID has led us to force us to get into is the adoption of digital technologies as well as digital solutions in a way that I think has never been seen before. So for us itself, I think building an effective community also, we need to be constantly looking about new technologies and innovation to help communities be able to communicate, interact, and work together very effectively. Like for example, over at JustCo itself, we apply a lot of technology into our business. Some of the new technologies we've actually implemented in place. We have implemented this new technology called Sixth Sense, which actually help us understand on the spatial use of our workspaces. That actually help us to understand how to design spaces better. At the same time, we also launched this new product, which is actually a switch. I believe David, you also could be quite familiar with the concept itself. Yeah, but I think that with regard to that itself, is always trying to find new ways of implementing technology and innovation to help with our community. Yeah.
So Thomas, from KMC's perspective, very similar track, different. What are some of the distinctions that you're seeing compared to JustCo?
I mean, it's amazing listening to Brandon. I think we're very much on the same page, and I totally agree. I think I think first off, exactly as Brandon mentioned, it's no good just assuming that you're putting on the right events every time, and I think it's absolutely crucial that you're constantly in touch with your clients, getting feedback. I saw Robert's question in the chat about how we go about getting that feedback, and there's lots of ways to do that with surveys, et cetera, and digital formats. But I think really, to really get to the the essence of it, I think you've got to pick up the phone. You've really got to speak to these guys and make sure that everybody's having a good experience, that we're covering the right topics, that it's relevant, it's of interest, because otherwise you can very, very quickly become irrelevant, and that's none of us want to go down that path. So I think that communication with clients is absolutely crucial, making sure that you've sort of identified early on the sort of events that they want to attend. I think also, just to add to some of the other comments, 100% you need to have that technology in place to host these events, etc. We've actually had something new this year, which is more sort of hybrid events, where you've got I won't say a handful, a bit more than a handful, but some people on site, socially distancing and everything else, wearing their face masks. And then you've got I sort of mentioned hybrid in the sense that you've also got a huge viewer base dialing into these events. So it's now both within the facility and in the internet. So I think yeah, the technology, and just to add to Brandon's point, I think try not to limit your community. Which is difficult, but I think at least in the Philippines, based on our experience, involving our sister companies, we have a full service real estate firm, consulting company. I think like reaching out to the bigger group, being very, very inclusive, and sort of broadening the community is crucial. So we have a lot of tie-ups with chambers and associations here in the Philippines that love coming in to use KMC spaces to host these events and things like that. So yeah, I think that's crucial as well. Really have a finger on the pulse. What do people really need to know right now? And obviously having some fun stuff as well, like health and wellness, cocktail, how to fix cocktails, all that fun stuff. So yeah, I think that's all. I think Brandon said it very well.
Yeah, I would like to jump in on this point.
Please go ahead.
So I think building effective communities. At one point, it's also how productive is that community itself, right? I think you as an operator or a landlord, an estate owner, or a park manager, one thing that we always try to do is to find community partners, right? We need some people to come along with us. It's not just us giving, instigating, facilitating. We need members of our target audience or our partners, our tenant community, to join us in this effort, because otherwise it will appear very one-dimensional. And oftentimes I think that's the toughest part, to kind of cross that line where you have partners that come along with you, whether they are businesses, enterprises themselves, or community champions, individuals from the tenant community themselves, who will step up and step out and say that I will lead this interest group, I will do something for you, I'll be that ringleader to kind of champion a series of activities for you on behalf and for the community. I think that's the part that will really start to kind of draw that differentiation of what you have. It could become very expensive maintaining a community if not done right. All right, because you're just throwing money at it. You keep doing events and things like that. People come and go, but there's no stickiness. All right, or for the matter, you have a very productive community where there are individuals who step up and do things for you. I think those are the ones that the most ideal state that we get to. And we have examples and efforts pre-COVID, where we have our Bridge Plus flexible workspace located in Singapore Science Park, located in a brand new building at that time, Ascend. We were engaging with the building tenants. We have multinationals like J&J, Dyson, and of course our unicorn like Shopee, or located within that building. We were finding and inviting them to join us in kind of embracing the community engagement, introducing some maybe programs that they would have kept in-house for their employees to the larger building community. All right, and that's great credits to them. They have been very supportive. They started to get to know how to interface with us as a landlord from that layer, because it's quite an unusual thing where as an asset owner and a landlord, we're telling you, come join us and do something together for the benefit and of the tenant community. They never had that sort of interactions before. It was always more of a tenant-landlord relationship, right? But when you get down to the level, and it's important, it took us a while to find that champions, right? The internal champions within those corporations to join us in this effort, whether it's for CSR, we talk about well-being, sustainability, and many of these common social related causes. You kind of champion that together. And then effectively, they know how to engage us. We gave them the platform. We have the spaces for it. We were co-funding activities together. We were broadcasting activities together. We then use that to kind of base load and form that foundation of what that community engagement meant for the Singapore Science Park. Because people can start to see the momentum. People are coming along. And people can see the examples of how productive it could be by just contributing a little bit to that community, you get a lot more back in that very tangible benefits. I think that part of dimension of how we build an effective and productive community is key, and we try to apply that to every estate. And flexible workspace offers that element, that element of having that diversity of users that can really help you pair up with that larger tenants that you may have within the estate. Right, they move a bit faster. All right, individual smaller companies, freelancers, business owners, or compared to multinationals or large enterprises. And in that case, we can very quickly kind of instigate and get something going and create a momentum for things to unfold. Right.
Right. Thanks for sharing that, Marcus. And I think this is a really good point. Look, we're down to about 10 minutes left. There are a couple of questions from the audience that I think are very good, and so let's just quickly cover that, and then we can wrap up with sort of one final topic. But one question that's come in is regarding actually listening to your customers. I mean, this has been a theme about sort of community development, so that we need to understand, the tenants, understand what people are talking about. So. The question is that really trying to find out more about some of the mechanisms for that kind of customer feedback. How are you as operators or developers communicating with users to be able to understand their needs? For that, maybe we can start off with Damien from your perspective in digital transformation.
Sure. Well, so the question is how to get feedbacks from the community. Is that correct?
Yeah, how do you get feedback from your users, your tenants, in terms of sort of the whole community creation or community development? What are some of the mechanisms for the client feedback?
Yeah, I guess that's actually also part of the community building. It's really it needs to be very interactive. In one of the more successful experiments that we have done, which is a student community, a co-living environment for students. Our experience is that, first of all, it took time to build, but once it's developed, as some of you mentioned earlier, we didn't even need to market because the new business comes from referral. And the students are very proactive, so they actually come to our host all the time telling us what they want or what they don't want. Well, at one point we had some barbecue space on the roof, and they said that that's useless. They don't need that, and they told us what they need instead. So this constant engagement is very important. And however, in order to get that, what we found is that getting the right host is very important. So it's kind of a bit of luck to get the right person to be the right host. But once you get that right person, it's all alive.
Shantanu, same question to you. I mean, from a sort of feedback mechanisms, customer feedback. What kind of things are you using? How do you communicate with users?
Yeah, so I think there are two levels of feedback. One is the feedback that we get from the companies, right? And when I say company, it's a key stakeholder of the companies saying what the organization needs, and then those kind of feedbacks typically happen on a one-on-one basis. You have to be in front of them or on a call with them, and you get that feedback. But I think the more challenging part is to get the feedback of the larger set of users, 30,000-40,000 people who are using the Office Park, and that's the most challenging part. And that's where I think technology, does come into play. Before technology, this could only be done through surveys, which we are not very sure were reaching to the right people at the right point of time. Were we getting the right kind of feedback or so? But I think with the use of technology, I think it's just a very simple survey that people can fill out. So if you do an event, we can ask people that, how did you like this event? What are the things that you liked about it, or why didn't you like it? What are the more things that you want us to do? These, and then of course, you'll have a bell curve of I would say feedback, but you go and target at the most bulkier portion of the bell curve and try to address that, because there will always be the outliers which you will not be able to address because you're trying to play the mass game. So so that's how we tend to do. And the very important part of that is to ensure that your end users come on board on your technology platform, and whether it's an app or something of that sort, because there are thousands of apps today out there, right? How do you ensure that the end user will download your app and will be continuously use it and be engaged with it? And there is the larger problem that you need to solve, is basically give them enough reasons for them to use it. So for example, we are trying to integrate access control on that app. So if you don't have that app, you don't get access control. You don't get parking if you don't get you don't have that app. You can't register your visitor if you don't have that app. So if you've given them enough reasons for just using the app because of their necessities, right? Parking, access, emergency exits, evacuations. These are all the necessities, right? If they see that there's a value in just having this app because my necessities are getting taken care of, right? Then slowly you can build on them to push more things in terms of engagement, community, and all of that. And then that conversation starts. It's not an easy process. It takes years to build that, right? As we speak, we are still at a nascent stage, but we can see some green shoots of that. People are starting to engage with each other. People are posting saying that, hey, I have a house which I'm living, but I'm relocating. Is there anybody else who want to rent it out? And then somebody comes to say, hey, it seems that our needs match. Why don't we look at it? Pre-COVID, we created an entire community of ride share, right? People were actually doing ride share on their own personal vehicles, right? And then there were tons of these examples. Thomas spoke about the entire transportation. What people think when they get up in the morning, how to reach the office, right? So if you solve all of these, slowly you will start seeing people starting to interact, on that platform. It takes time, but you have to be patient. But I don't think unless until you have technology, you can't address the larger gathering of the end users. You can always continue to address the key stakeholders on a one-on-one basis.
Yeah, and that sort of brings me back to one, and this will probably be our last question for this session, but this is something that came in from the audience, which is, the question about sort of generational issues, right? So for example, we talk about the app, and it's sort of, I guess there's a question in terms of, is the requirement or the expectation of a 21-year-old fresh grad from an office the same as, say, somebody who is, maybe a Gen X or somebody who's like much more senior in the career? Do we need to look at communities within communities? How about dealing with sort of different personality traits, say introverts versus extroverts? So be interested very briefly to get some feedback from the panel, on some of these generational issues and what you're seeing. This is an open question for everyone, and it's quite, maybe we could start off with Thomas, since, I know I'm guessing that you'd be dealing more with Gen Ys and Gen Zs.
Yeah, I think, the population pyramid here in the Philippines, or at least in the NCR or Metro Manila, it's a very, very, very young population here. So, I think when you look at the workforce in the Philippines, we're probably looking, or at least as I keep saying, in sort of office buildings in Metro Manila, we're not looking at probably quite such an extreme range as in maybe other parts of the region. It feels like almost everybody's between the age of about 20 and 30 in Manila. That's how it feels when you walk the streets. So we are we're very mindful that we have to cater for that audience in terms of the end user. Our mission here is to work to make work and life better for all of our members. So if that means making these spaces incredibly Instagrammable and everything else, then so be it. It's not, like, to be honest, it's not something that we've spent a huge amount of time on in terms of different parts of the facility for different members based on their age group and some of the other factors that were mentioned in your question, David. So maybe something that we should start looking at, but not something that we again, you know, I think we're really catering for that millennials workforce here, and what we do is really about making sure our clients can attract and retain you know, that top tier talent within their organization. So yeah, I guess that's certainly the age group that we'd be most focused on here in the Philippines.
Right. So look, I mean, we're coming up on time. I've really appreciated all your insights. I found this a fascinating discussion. One final question to end off, and for all of you, you know, we've talked about community and the importance. Ranking community from 1 to 10, where 10 is like extremely critical and 1 is like nothing. Very quickly, how would you rank community and the importance within your business and your business outlook? Starting with Marcus.
Right. I'll put it at 8.
8. Thomas?
Yeah, 9. I was going to say, but yeah, 9.
9. Okay. Brandon?
I will say a 10.
10. Damien?
I'll say a 7.
7. Shantanu?
Yeah, I mean, I would also say it's you know, between 8 and 9. I mean, I think it's right up there.
Yeah, I am seeing a little bit of a difference in between sort of where you are in the, I mean, I think we all agree it's important, but I think it seems that the flexible providers are probably a little bit more, it's even more important, which makes a lot of sense. Gentlemen, look, it's been a real pleasure about community. You know, I've enjoyed the discussion a lot, really appreciate the contribution. And you know, our deepest thanks for the time that you've taken today and for your contributions. And with that, you know, let's we bring this panel to a close. Thank you very much, everybody, and appreciate your time.